Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast, a podcast about stage musicals that have been legally filmed and publicly distributed. The Filmed Live Musicals website contains information on nearly 200 musicals that have been captured live. Check it out at filmedlivemusicals.com. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Filmed Live Musicals podcast. I'm your host, Luisa Lyons, and my guest today is producer, writer, historian, and curator Jennifer Ashley Tepper. Among her extensive credits, Jennifer is the author of the excellent 4-volume book series, The Untold Stories of Broadway, featuring over 250 interviews with people who make Broadway happen. Creator of the concert series, If It Only Runs a Minute, celebrating underappreciated and short-lived musicals, and the Jonathan Larson Project, featuring previously unheard music and cut songs by Rent composer Jonathan Larson. The producer of several musicals by Joe Iconis, including Be More Chill, Broadway Bounty Hunter, and Love and Hate Nation. The map room curator at the Museum of Broadway, and the creative and programming director at 54 Below, where she has curated or produced over 3,500 shows. I'm so excited to have her on the podcast. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you so much for having me and the lovely introduction.
Oh, you're so welcome. So you've shared previously that you grew up in Florida and as a kid you wanted to be the theater and knew that you wanted to live and breathe Broadway. How did theater come into your life and how did you know that Broadway was where you wanted to be?
I was really lucky because growing up in South Florida, I was surrounded by just like touring houses, regional theater. I went to like a wonderful local theater summer camp and went to an amazing public high school for theater. So I just, as I grew up, my family, who are all in the medical field, all were theater fans. You know, no one was working in theater, but, you know, my dad is the kind of doctor who will sing from musicals to his patients. And my mom was constantly getting me like the 8 cast albums that I asked for Hanukkah and taking me to shows. You know, everyone in my family was very encouraging and very much like nurtured my love for theater. And I just became obsessed with knowing the most musicals. And, you know, I loved being in shows when I was growing up at camp and in high school, but I loved almost, you know, even more saying, oh my God, I just discovered this musical. We should sing this song from it. You should learn this writer. So I think I was putting on the historian and producer hat at a pretty young age.
And so it sounds like I need to make a visit to Dr. Tepper, your dad. I will take a doctor who sings Broadway show tunes to me.
That's definitely him.
Where do you think their love for theater came from as medical people? Like they didn't go into theater professionally, but where did their love come from?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it goes all the way back to just like my grandparents, you know, listening to cast albums and saving up their money to take their kids to go see shows. It's like, you know, I have a family going pretty far back of just theater fans. So I'm the first person in my family who ended up working in the theater, but my sister is like an incredible entertainment attorney who makes a lot of theater happen and represents a lot of theater clients. So the two of us kind of pioneered the like, now we're going to bring the family into working in the theater. And we both moved to New York.
Oh, wow. And is the rest of your family still in Florida?
Oh, I have a lot of family still in Florida, but luckily my mom is here. In fact, we're in the middle of 3 shows in a row of like 3 nights in a row where we're seeing shows together. So
yes.
Yeah, we're all just big, super fans of theater.
I love that. And you mentioned going to camp. Was that in Florida or in New York?
Yeah, I went to local JCC theater camp for 10 years. So 10 years of doing musicals. And yeah, it was just like a formative experience. You know, it wasn't sleepaway camp, but it felt like it because we would all, you know, practice musicals all day and then basically have sleepovers at each other's houses. But it was really wonderful to like spend the summer with a bunch of kids who also, you know, wanted to sing and dance from Grease and Annie and kind of learn how to be part of a cast as I was growing up. Because I think that camaraderie in the theater, that's what sticks with you from early on and kind of makes you want to chase the dream.
You've talked before about the Florida Thespians. Can you talk about what that is for folks who don't know?
Sure. You know, Florida Thespians is my favorite thing about Florida. It was so life-changing and formative to me. So Florida Thespians is every year about 8,000 high school theater kids converge on the city of Tampa for a week of competitions in different categories from solo musical to monologues to costume design, beyond that. And, every night you have multiple high schools doing their full theater productions for an audience full of 1,000, theater high schoolers. And there's workshops and there's, like a lot of different educational opportunities. And every year in high school when I went, it was like what I imagined it would feel like to be in New York and to work on Broadway. And in fact, when I did work on Broadway years later, every time we were having a great day, I'd be like, this feels like Thespians. It was just, so many people kind of sharing love for theater in different ways for a week all together. And so Thespians was super important to me growing up. My junior year, I won for group musical, the state championship. I always say I lovingly copied Ann L. Nathan's performance from Forget About the Boy in Thoroughly Modern Millie from the Tony Awards. And my school won the state champion that year for Forget About the Boy from Thoroughly Modern Millie. But I go back every year and adjudicate the students and, give them feedback and do workshops. And it's just the greatest thing ever. It's truly like the most fun time. I talk about it so much that every time I bring, this year, I did the middle school Florida Thespians and brought George Salazar as a guest and brought my boyfriend who's, a theater musician also. And we all judged and had like the time of our lives. And they were both like, oh, we understand. George is a Florida Thespian alumni, but he'd never been back to, perform as a professional or as a guest. And they were both like, oh, we totally get why this is like your favorite week of the year now.
What an amazing way to give back to a program that obviously had such a big impact on you and like inspired you growing up and your love of theater.
Yeah, it's really the best to be back there. And it's such a time warp, walking into the same rooms where I remember I was like, I heard Songs for a New World for the first time in this room. And then, someone in that room is performing from a musical I worked on a few years ago now. So it's really like full circle and a wonderful thing.
How inspiring. And you mentioned watching the Tony Awards. So you obviously attended a lot of live theater growing up and were part of a lot of live theater. How much filmed theater did you watch growing up?
So much film theater. Even though I was so lucky to be surrounded by a lot of regional productions, film theater was really my window into what was happening in New York, from the Tony Awards to, every year, like the Thanksgiving Day Parade was almost as religious for me as the Tony Awards because, you get to see those shows performing in the middle of New York City, like on the street. How exciting. And there were so many, some of the ones that were really important to me growing up. My stepmom always likes to make fun of when she showed me Gypsy with Bette Midler. And at the end, I was like, that was great. You know what? That would make a good show. Just like a precocious 8-year-old. But, the TV musicals were super, often played in our house. We watched the Bye Bye Birdie with Jason Alexander and Vanessa Williams over and over. We watched Brandy Cinderella over and over. A lot of the ones that were kind of like on TV in the 90s were really exciting to us. But I also had the VHSs for Broadway leading ladies. And, a lot of it was 90s, like, hey, this aired on TV once and I taped it onto a VHS.
And how about things like great performances, like the professional captures of like Sweeney Todd, Sunday the Park with George's One, or Into the Woods?
Yeah, you know what is so funny? I became fans of those a little bit later because, and this is, I'm really weird with spoilers, and with shows like that, I was like, I'm going to see Sweeney Todd in person. So I don't want any spoilers from that live capture. I don't know, some got past me, some I couldn't resist, and some I was like, no, someday I'll see Sweeney Todd and then I'll watch it. So some I think I became more obsessed with like in high school or in college after I had seen productions of the shows. I was weird like that.
Oh, that's so funny. So are you a person that doesn't like to listen to cast recordings before you go to see a show live?
Yes, but it totally depends. Like if a show, is coming to Broadway and they've released a cast album in the months coming up to it, or if I just haven't seen it on Broadway yet and they've released a cast album, I will totally wait. If I think I'm going to see it, if I don't think I'm going to see it, I'm not resisting, rare and inspiring musicals of the 80s that, are not often produced because I haven't seen them yet. But it's more of like if I'm going to see it. And I also, it depends. Like if a show is playing in San Diego, I'll watch all the B-roll. I'll be really excited to see their TV performance. If a show is playing in San Diego, is coming to New York next season, I usually won't. I'll usually save it.
That's amazing. That takes I know you are deeply immersed in the world, so you know exactly what's coming up.
Yeah.
But I'm someone that like I need to consume everything immediately. And
Yeah, totally. And so many people are, I know, who are like that. And also, it's like, I find that I treasure the filmed versions like sometimes more when I've either like seen it first and then I'm like watching it. It's so great to have it to like relive the live experience. It just really depends.
Yeah. What was your journey to coming to New York?
As you said, like I wanted to be the theater and I was convinced, I just wanted to go to school in New York and that turned into wanting to go to NYU. And I only applied to NYU, I applied early decision and I said, if I don't get into NYU, like I'm not going anywhere else. I'll chain myself to my bedroom until I get in. Luckily I got in. I don't know if I would have actually pulled that off. But I really was just like hell bent on New York and NYU. And I majored in dramatic writing at Tisch, which was really because, I loved theater and I loved writing. And I didn't necessarily want to be like a playwright or a screenwriter, which is what that department is for. But there wasn't exactly like a correct fit for me at NYU. There's no like theater historian / producer undergrad. And it really turned out to be the best in a lot of ways where I got a lot out of being in a department full of writers and in terms of just like sharpening historian skills and kind of tailoring my major a little bit towards the kind of writing I wanted to do and being around writers and critiquing and dramaturging. And then also because my major wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, it really was like New York City became my campus and I had so many like internships and volunteer positions and would constantly go to any show I could get a free or inexpensive ticket to and take notes on it and would assign myself books about what I was seeing. So I produced like shows on campus because that wasn't part of my major directly. So I think really being in New York but having a department that I was like going through in college that checked some of the things I wanted to learn about and not all of them made me more self-motivated and proactive, and it just kind of inspired me to teach myself the things I wanted to learn because like I wasn't going to waste being in New York City after like waiting my whole life to come to New York City.
The way you're talking, like this self-motivated, self-driven like desire to just immerse yourself and to know everything and to like absorb as much as you can reminds me of someone who I know that you have inspired, Margaret Hall, and who you led her to writing the Gemignani biography, and like that's, and I know she studied at NYU as well, and this like the amazing way that you have both like taken your passion for theater and like used it to feed yourselves, but then also shared that with others.
She's amazing. I'm in awe of her. And like everything she does, I'm like, oh my God, like we're like soul friends, I'm like completely enamored of her Gemignani book. She did an unbelievable job on it. And I'm just amazed by her. She's like doing great work on so many different levels.
And how quickly she wrote it too. It's like, it's mind-boggling to think it was all done over Zoom, and like it's extraordinary.
Yes,
But
totally. Margaret's putting together a tribute to Howard Ashman and Alan Menken at 54 Below in July. So I just, with all that she has on her plate in terms of writing and everything else, I'm really grateful she's taking a moment to do a 54 Below show.
ooh, very excited. And do you know if that will be streamed?
I don't remember offhand. I feel like the answer is yes, but I don't remember offhand.
I am keeping all my fingers and toes crossed. That sounds amazing. So going back a little bit, you mentioned about interning and doing internships in New York City. One of those early ones was with Title of Show.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you share more about that experience and what that led to?
So when I was in school at NYU, I was so obsessed with the musical Title of Show, and so were a lot of my fellow students. And one of the things I did on campus was I produced this kind of like original song cycle sort of concert, like very, early version of a lot of the work I'd end up doing later, featuring NYU students. And it was like surrounding a theme. And, we did it for BCFA, to benefit BCFA. And I really wanted to include material from Title of Show. And so I wrote to them. I wrote to so many people, and so many like wrote back me, this little NYU student who was just blind emailing or writing them letters. Marvin Hamlish came and spoke to us, which was unbelievable because we were doing some material from a chorus line and a class act. And, that was amazing. And I wrote to, the team from Title of Show, and they were really kind, and they wrote back and they said, they had just finished their off-Broadway run. And they said, their music was in the process of getting published. So because of that, they couldn't send any of it out to be performed until like that whole process was done, which totally made sense. And I invited them to come see like our little NYU show anyway. And they came, which was amazing. And everyone was just like blown away by the fact that they, came to see some NYU kids do a show that they didn't even have work in. It was very kind. And we kept in touch from there. And then I had another internship right after that at the Rodgers and Hammerstein organization, where I basically worked because I worshiped Ted Chapin and his book about follies and wanted to just work for him. And Jeff Bowen, who's, the composer lyricist of Title of Show, he was doing some work at Rodgers and Hammerstein as well at the time. So we just I kept in their orbit and we were there at the same time. And then Jeff and Hunter were like, we're going to create this web series before, theater web series were ever a thing. And it was one of the very first ones, if not the first. And they were like, we're going to make this thing saying we're going to Broadway and kind of like chronicle our journey to Broadway and trying to get our show from off Broadway to Broadway. So I became their intern my senior year of college and spent all of senior year, kind of working on that web series first, and then doing a lot of other tasks, pertaining to them kind of getting to Broadway. And at the end of my senior year, when Title of Show actually was going to Broadway, the director, Michael Buress, hired me as his assistant because they knew me from that whole internship experience. So it was like the greatest thing ever to kind of go from directly from college to spending a couple months at the Lyceum as his assistant on Title of Show. It really kind of blew my mind in so many ways to not only be working on Broadway, but be working on a musical I'd loved for so long and to be exploring a Broadway theater every day. It really was the ultimate, take advantage of the opportunity, be ready for it when it comes, reach out to people who you want to work with, and you never know when that might turn into something. And it really just was a combination of timing and magic.
And you mentioned that Title of Show was one of the first shows to create a web series, that it was one of the first shows to really kind of use that early social media as a promotional tool and as a way to engage fans and to get people involved in the show. It wasn't just putting an ad on TV. It was like a conversation with audiences. What do you think has been the impact for you in terms of streaming stuff from 54 Below with that experience behind you? That's
a great question. And it really is when I think back on so many things with what they were doing as far as the web series and also in terms of social media, it's Broadway was 2008 for Title of Show. Off Broadway was a couple years before that. So I guess it was really mid 2000s. It was so different. When I tell you, I was brought to some ad meetings when we were working on the show for Broadway as part of the hey, we're doing the web series, we're working on the show for Broadway. And I was always the youngest person in the room, and things were said should our show have a Facebook page? And everyone was like, no, that's really just college students. It was so not long ago, and yet it was an eternity away. At some point, someone will really write a book about how social media and Broadway, that whole thing, how it happened. But in terms of the web series, even though it was Title of Show, it was so small, it was so scrappy, it was us putting it together. So many of the episodes featured theater celebrities, people that were in other Broadway shows, Title of Show, the gang is kind of professional bands, just like I, kind of sought to become. And I feel so much was kind of percolating then, as far as someone would come on and be a guest and be oh, we were thinking backstage at Little Mermaid of doing something a chronicle of our show for Broadway.com or something. And it really did start to become more of a thing. And I think because of the way that fans felt so personally touched by being part of the journey via the web series, that really made people want to give a window in on their shows to fans and really show more of the behind the scenes, in not just in a one-off way, but in a let's really chronicle our journey to Broadway or our journey on Broadway, and bring fans into the experience.
Mm-hmm. It seems that there's still resistance by shows to let people in backstage or into the journey, really. There's this desire to only show the sparkly finished product. What do you think that resistance comes from?
There certainly have been situations where it has not behooved the show to do it, and where creatives obviously they need to work with the safety of privacy to some degree. So I think people just like, everyone has a different opinion on what that range of privacy is. And like, it doesn't mean you have to show the audience every single thing and have like a, old timey reporter there who's going to like scoop the song before the audience hears it. But I think it's also like, at any given moment, and this will always be true, a large range of people from different generations and age groups and like backgrounds in terms of their experience with technology are working on a show. So even if it's, people in their 20s working on a Broadway show have one understanding about like how much they want to let people in. Like, think about how, your grandparents' generation posts on social media versus how someone who's, in high school right now does. And that's just impacting, I think, how everyone working on a show who all are from those different groups want to share and like what they want to share, how often they want to share, who they want to be the person sharing. So often on a Broadway show, a lot of the people in charge are not necessarily in the rehearsal room. So it's like, it depends on, our producer's going to let someone who is not the person responsible for all of the decisions to just shine their camera at whatever they want, or is it going to have to go through an approval system? It just really kind of depends on each individual show's situation and kind of what they're okay with. And I do think it also has to do with just like what the show's trajectory is in general. A lot of it is like, if you're doing a revival of Kiss Me Kate, you're probably more willing to like let people into the rehearsal room with cameras than if you're doing a brand new musical where, we don't want people to think that song is our final song because we've changed it later, even though I think obviously what I think you and I both believe, it's like the people who would be interested in watching that behind the scenes are not necessarily the people that are going to like gotcha about the process. So it's really just, I feel like it's a lot of cooks in the kitchen when everyone has a phone and everyone is able to kind of be that creator now.
And like you mentioned, that like need for safety, like on a new show, we're still figuring things out, and there's like the need for play and the need for experimenting, and it's not necessarily not that it's not wise, but kind of takes away the element of safety to be able to do anything in the room when there's a camera present or you're documenting it for public audiences versus like Kiss Me Kate. We've done this show 1,000 times, and it's like we pretty much know what this is going to look like at the end.
Totally. And it's also like, it's a difference between knowing that filming is happening and not. I think the moment that everyone got a phone and everyone got an Instagram, and it was like, you as an actor, you're like, I'm showing up to rehearsal in my sweatpants and like, I want to like, learn this song with my scene partner on the spot. And you're going to have a different thing you come to the table with if it's like, playbill.com is here today to film a behind the scenes video. So I think it just, when it became, and even with something like the Title of Show web series, it's like we weren't, it wasn't all off the cuff. It was, oh, this person's coming today and we're filming this part of the journey. So I think it's just now that it can happen at any time without warning, there have had to be more rules that like protect actors and protect creatives.
Yeah, absolutely. And to fast forward to 54 Below, what I've loved about the content from 54 Below is that it's an amazing way to go behind the scenes in these these great concert formats that give us an insight into how a show develops. You stream everything from like brand new concert readings to the reunion concerts to specials. Like the range of the content at 54 Below is just so thrilling. And I love that from very early on you've made it available to people through streaming. How did you come to be involved with 54 Below?
Yeah. So I have been the creative and programming director since 2013. The venue opened in 2012 with a different programming director, Phil Bond, who was amazing and who moved on to doing more of his own shows. And I took over as creative and programming director in 2013. And, it's been such a journey in terms of what we've shared on video and streaming and all of that. In terms of the general journey, it was like the perfect job for me in so many ways and still is, of like, I get to work with such a, large array of different musical theater centric artists. It's, young artists, it's older artists, it's Broadway legends, it's emerging writers, it's new producers, it's people that are doing Broadway shows right now. It's just like all the folks I listened to on cast albums growing up. And then all of the people that like, I came up with myself in the theater world who are now making a mark. It's just like, it's so fun to get to kind of capitalize on every single part of like the theater sphere that I love. So it's that. It's also like, it's really exciting to do 14 different shows a week. It's also insane chaos. But, it's not the job where you're doing the same show 8 times a week. It's like so much content, so many new collaborations. Like, it's really an exciting place to be all the time. There's truly never a dull moment. I love about concerts and cabaret that, you can film it. It's like if you're doing a show on Broadway every night, you might have no public chronicle of like that performance. But if you're coming to 54 Below to do your solo show, like, of course that you can put that up on YouTube. And so much of like my early years in New York was spent obsessing over like concerts on YouTube and new musical theater concerts and reunion concerts. And it's so exciting to me that like, a couple days after the concert, whether you were there or not, you can see it on the internet. It was just like the video of it all really was like a big love for me. It had big love for me. And then with streaming, like when we had obviously, we'd been trying to make a streaming program happen for long before COVID, and all that entails. And we were so glad, like during COVID, one of the silver linings was really being able to cultivate this streaming program and having folks being able to watch a number of our shows from home and from wherever they are. When I do go to Florida Thespians, I often have like high schoolers in Florida who are like, I love 54 Below. And of course, like they've never been there. They've seen it on YouTube or they've seen a live stream. So the streaming program is so great. It is the kind of thing where because musicians have to get paid separately for streams, licensing agencies have to get paid separately for streams if it's, a licensed commodity. There are, of course, costs in terms of like equipment and personnel and, videographers, all that stuff. We are not able to stream all of our shows yet. The dream would be to stream all of our shows with the understanding that some artists might, similar to kind of the conversation we were just having, want to just do their show for the live audience and not have that be the version that's like out there in the world everywhere yet. But the goal is, to stream more and more of our performances. It has been interesting as we've moved from the 2021 reopening era when people were all still staying home and we were having a lot of trouble, like, bringing people back in person and the COVID of it all, where our live stream numbers were one thing and where we were making decisions about how many shows we could stream and who we could stream based on what the market would bear in 2021 to 2023, where it's kind of evened out and where it's like, can we stream this show? Will this break even? Who will sell what? It's really just been like a lot of things, it's like unpredictable because you never know when, someone is going to get retweeted by a fellow artist and then sell their whole 50 tickets based on that. It's all pretty unpredictable, but our streaming program has definitely been like thriving and we're really excited that it's been another way to get 54 Below out there into the world.
Oh, I have so many questions about this. When you first started streaming, was there resistance either from the industry as a whole or from, like you mentioned, some artists don't want to stream for whatever reason, but was there resistance to making the shows available online?
Not really. I think part of it is like if you're streaming the show, then you're, charging the audience member. And because of that, artists obviously have to be compensated. And so it's really just like a budget and an algorithm of like, if you don't know how many tickets you're going to sell, like when we do live shows at 54 Below, we are paying a fee based on the ticket price. And that's either a flat fee, so you know what you're getting no matter what, or it's a flat fee plus a partial split over a certain number of tickets sold. So like, you might get slightly more if you sell like a lot of tickets, but you still know you're getting that guarantee. But with streaming, there's no way for there to be a guarantee. We don't know. There are streams that sell 3 tickets. There are streams that sell 600 tickets. And it's really not as predictable who is in which category as you would think. And there's every number in between. So with the streams, it's the kind of deal, which is standard for everyone, involves like paying for costs and then splitting the rest of the money. It's like, basically designed so that hopefully we can meet our costs and the artist can meet theirs. But if you're a show that has 9 musicians and 20 performers, if it's like a new musical and concert, if it's something with like a larger band, a lot of folks that aren't streaming are only doing so because they're like, without knowing how much money we're going to make, I don't know how to pay the personnel. So a lot of the back and forth about streaming is like, how do we sell enough tickets to be able to pay for oh, this is a musical in concert. We have to give money to those writers because we're getting permission to do their show. Oh, if we stream this show, how do we help artists participate in the income without knowing how much income there will be? So, yeah, a lot of it is back and forth about that. And then some of it is just, yeah, like not knowing what the show will be and knowing that a lot of times with streaming now, if you're an artist that plays at 54 Below every 3 months, you're probably not going to have enough audience to stream your show necessarily every 3 months. And so, like, oh, I'm not going to stream my June show because my September show is something that I have worked on for years and I'm really excited to finally have that kind of out in the world via streaming. Whereas my June show, I'm still like working on. It's a different piece of content. So it's like all kinds of logistical reasons. Nobody's really been like, I don't want this out in the world. Sometimes people are like, I want to put this on YouTube entirely for free, or I want to decide which clips go on YouTube later. I don't want it to be live. There's a lot of kind of factors that go into it, but overall, it's like the logistics of it all and now that we are a nonprofit and we are trying to raise funds for all of these initiatives, it's like certainly something on the list is like, how do we subsidize the streaming program enough so that we don't have to worry as much about breaking even on all the costs and personnel, and artists don't have to worry about the cost of personnel, and the decisions can just be made based on like artistic reasoning and like, do we want to stream this? This is how we pay for it. We have the subsidy to fill that in. So that's the dream.
And because it's a concert set up at 54 Below, do you need to worry about, like, how do union negotiations factor into your contracts?
Yeah, so we are unionized by Local 802, the musicians union. So everything we do is, under their jurisdiction, and we have to follow the rules set forth by Local 802 with all of our live shows and all of our stream shows. We're not a theatrical venue. We're not an equity venue. We don't do, musicals. We don't do plays. Anytime we do a musical in concert, there's very little dialogue. There's no costumes. Most of the time, people are not necessarily even playing specific roles. It's really like a concert version. So we don't we don't contend with the actors' equity. And, like as far as other unions, it's not, it's basically all broken down based on, being a concert venue, not being a theatrical venue.
Okay, that's very interesting. And are there rules about, like, I know with cabaret, venues will be covered by I forget the name of the license now. The music license to be able to perform the music. And then how does that work with streaming?
Yeah, all of our music licenses, we have all of the ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, like all of those music licenses, which are very expensive for a 14 shows a week, venue for a full year. We have all of the music licenses in place. So everything is essentially covered. What's not covered is when we're doing, I'm just going to keep using Kiss Me Kate, and I have no idea why. I haven't even seen or listened to that musical recently. But like when we do Kiss Me Kate, we need to we don't license the show. It's not like when you're doing Kiss Me Kate at your regional theater and you license it, but we still need permission from the licensing company that does license Kiss Me Kate. And it's, hey, we're doing a concert version. It's 60 minutes long. We're not doing any dialogue. We just need permission because if there's a revival coming to Broadway of Kiss Me Kate, they're not going to let a New York City concert happen. So we still need permission that goes through the proper rights holders for that property, and to use the title. If someone's doing a concert at 54 Below and they're including 3 songs from Kiss Me Kate and it's like their solo show, that's covered through our music licenses, and we pay for those music licenses. But when we're doing a full musical and using the name of the property, then we might have additional funds needed to pay the licensing agent and also to do the show.
And do you need to do extra negotiating, or are different contracts involved for the streaming side of things?
Yes. So a lot of our licensed musicals in concert would like to stream, and it's honestly one of the things is like it's just another expense, and it's fairly expensive, and that's because like they're still building out those contracts, and I think a lot of it is also like they don't know how many tickets we're going to sell. There's no possibility of like, hey, this licensing agency is going to make X percent of this street. Like you can't, it's a small pool. You can't cut people in percentages. It has to be fees. And so the prices that are quoted to us are just, hey, if you want to stream Kiss Me Kate, you have to pay $600, and the artist or us or some combination is going, okay, well, we're not going to sell enough tickets to pay the licensing company $600, the actors, the musicians, the technician. Like, it's just really dependent on how much gets charged. And then sometimes, it's if people that are creative team members from that musical, like if it's a reunion concert and it's a show that happened, 20 years ago, and the writers are involved in doing the reunion concert 54 Below, a lot of times the fees will be different. And it's mostly because if the creative team members are actually putting on the concert, then they know, like, how small the margins are and how much money is actually going to be made. And the fees can kind of be dictated based on like what the thing is, rather than like, hey, this is the standard fee when you stream Kiss Me Kate from your high school or regional theater or anywhere, and it doesn't make sense for like an 146 seat venue that's doing it one time. It just kind of depends on the numbers a lot of the time.
I think that's like a really insightful look into like how complicated this issue is. And like, every so often on Twitter there'll be a like, just why can't everything be streamed, why like release the archives? And it's like, it's so complicated because there are so many different players, there are so many different contracts, there are so many different things to consider. It's not just like, yes, it's easy now to film things and put things online, but who is being compensated and who's been compensated fairly, and are the negotiations fair? Like it's super, super complex.
It is. And it's like, as soon as you put something out there, it's like everyone needs, compensation for their creative work. And sometimes that's 100 people that all, like the scenic designer, the sound designer, all the actors, and you get into this thing where you're like, the amount of money we're paying for this negotiation is already, we're losing money based on like just all the negotiations are costing money. So it's complicated. And I do think one of the best things about the COVID era in terms of streaming is that like a lot of it has been standardized, and some of that is not good because you might be getting quoted a number that doesn't make sense for what you're doing, but at least it's standard. So it's like, if you want to do this, we know this is how much it costs, or like this is the agreement we use when we do this. And I think some of that has really helped in terms of like, 5 years ago, a lot of those licensing properties did not have, you couldn't stream it no matter what. There was no process for that. So having a process where, no one wants, writers to be paid more than me. No one wants musicians and actors and everyone to be paid more than me. But it's like, you just line it up and you see, where's the money coming from? Does the money exist to pay for those things? And then you make kind of the decision.
Yeah, there's just so many factors to be thinking about and it's like you say, you're doing 14 shows a week, so that's a lot of thinking about.
It is.
That's like, you start to get a sense of like what your day to day looks like. It's a lot of negotiating. What is the camera setup at 54 Below?
It's amazing. We have multiple camera angles. I can't speak about this as intelligently as our head of video, Becky, would be able to speak about it. But my favorite thing now is there's a seat that I can sit in the room where I have a perfect view of the stage, but I also can watch Becky in her booth, Becky Morris is our head of video, and she's like conducting the live stream cams live. And I'm watching like the performance on stage, and then I'm seeing like which camera she's clicking to. It's very thrilling. So that's my non-technical explanation of where the cameras are. No, but we have like a variety of camera angles throughout the room that capture, everything from the view of the keys that the pianist or writer, whoever is at the keys, is playing, every angle on stage. It's really fun to watch some of our larger shows and see like, oh my God, she's like a one woman, crew, kind of switching all those angles back and forth.
That's super cool. I'm blanking on the name of the program that a lot of places use, where you can see the different angles all in one on one screen, and then you like tap between the
I don't remember
angles.
Either.
It'll come to me after, and I'll be like, it was this. But it is so fun to watch those screens. One of my favorite places to stream from is the Young Vic in the UK, and they allow the audience to choose. They have 7 different camera angles, and you as the audience member can choose which camera you're watching, including conductor cam, which is my absolute favorite.
I have not done that, and now I need to do that.
Highly recommend. It's fabulous. But it's so fun. And again, like this is another kind of way that that we could be including audiences, is like which eye are we watching? And there's a great thing about being able to watch a live stream directed by someone who is really good at picking the angles and they know the show, and
Totally.
people, we have so many experts in that field now, but it is really fun also as an audience member to be able to choose which camera you're going to be watching through.
Totally.
Um, what what has been the response to the 54 Below streams?
It's been great. I mean, one of the best parts of it, as I said, is like when I'm anywhere else and people are like, oh, I love 54 Below. They know it a lot of times from streaming and from being able to watch it in their own towns that are, not necessarily people who live in the tri state area. Folks have really loved it, and artists have really loved giving that additional kind of point of accessibility to fans. I would say, like, the majority of artists are fully on board for it, in terms of what it is, and really want to figure out the best ways to stream their shows.
Mm. Do you have a particular, like a favorite concerts?
Favorite like streams?
Yeah.
Or favorite concerts? Honestly, no. It is hard with this though, where it's like it's just such a volume of shows we do around the clock that it's like, obviously, like over the past 12 years, we have had shows where I've been hands-on producing things like the Jonathan Larson Project you mentioned, and If It Only Runs a Minute, and all of the Joe Iconis and Family shows. And there's certainly been shows where like I'm pouring my own blood, sweat, and tears into producing them, making them happen. But it's also like, I am so thrilled by all of these like artists we get to have at 54 Below who I don't really even know that well. And then once we've worked together and we're putting them on stage, I'm like, this person is phenomenal. And by people who are, again, like Broadway legends I grew up worshiping. And I'm so thrilled to even be a tiny part of their 54 Below show. And then it's like, I just get to, by the night of, sit back and be like an audience member and a fan. So it really is like, there are just so many great ones. Like in the next couple of days, we have a 95th birthday celebration for Charles Strauss, where it's like tons of people that have done Charles Strauss musicals on Broadway are like celebrating his legacy, just like things like that. It's, it's a very unique place to work that's unlike any other venue.
Oh, is that being streamed too?
It is. It is.
Is there a concert that you wish, either coming up or in the past, that you wish everyone could see?
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing. It's like, when we do 60 shows a month and we're streaming, 15 of them, there are always about 45 shows where I'm like, oh man, that person would have loved that. Like, or, even just like that person, I wish they could have seen it in the club in person. So, yeah, definitely there are. It's like, it's the beauty of live theater is how ephemeral it is, and like that you don't know, and having those streams is such a special part of like capturing. And I'm sure a lot of the streams, it can be years from now and those will still exist, and those, whether you saw it live or not, there might be some way that they do come back or someone is sharing it later on. But even when we're not streaming, like a lot of times artists are still capturing their shows on video, putting what they want on YouTube, years later. Like it really, you never know when something is going to kind of come out. And the great thing is that it's mostly all been captured, which is something, you can't do for better or for worse in theatrical productions.
And like you said, that ephemeral nature of it all, it happens once or like maybe twice. With all of these recordings, is 54 Below, how are you preserving the recordings? And is there like are you creating like the 54 Below archive?
No, the thing is, we're not allowed to record it. Artists are allowed to record it. That's the thing. Is so
Mm.
like if we're recording it, then we would have to contend with a whole bunch of other like unions and payment situations. It's really that because artists are allowed to archive their own shows and allowed to use it for their own promotion. And 54 Below can sometimes post that on their pages or get a copy, but we're not allowed to have any kind of like structured sanction. And it's not us capturing it. It's like, hey, artists, you're welcome to hire this videographer we recommend, your own videographer, have it done in-house. But it's like the artist owns it. We don't own any of it. And so because of that, it's like, if we did start trying to own it, I think it would all stop. We would not have video.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Like the historian in me is like, no, this like there needs to be, okay, the official like part of Tuft, the Theater and Film and Type Archive at the New York Public Library, the 54 Below archive, because there's literally thousands of incredible historic concerts that, over the last 11
Yeah.
2012. yes, what year is it? The past,
I forget.
decade, there's just been so many concerts. Um, and now, yeah, I find that really interesting that there's not like really a centralized place for all of those recordings.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier that 54 Below is now a not-for-profit. Congratulations! I know that's a huge undertaking. What are the goals? What's the future for 54 Below?
Yeah, we had been trying for years to kind of make that transition into nonprofit. Our venue is very unique in that we're not part of like for the past, 12 years. It's like unlike other venues in New York City that do concerts and cabaret, we're not attached to a nonprofit. We're not attached to a hotel. We, for this whole time, have been like a standalone commercial entity where everything has to be, done in house, from the kitchen and restaurant to the marketing to the programming to the front of house. It's like, as a commercial entity, not attached to anything else, it was not a sustainable business model. It's making that every single show has to make a certain amount of money, and that there's so many question marks with concerts and cabaret. There was no way to meet the expenses of what artists need to be paid and what people on staff needed to be paid and what, maintenance needed to be paid and rent needed to be paid. There was just no way for that to be a sustainable business model without becoming a nonprofit like all of the other venues are if they're not attached to hotels. So we did kind of think about different ways to do this for years. And of course, for years have been like, oh my God, when we're a nonprofit, not only do we want to raise money to like make the business sustainable, but also to subsidize a streaming program or have an artist grant program or have a ticket subsidy program. And so there are all of these things that we have been dreaming of for years where we're finally like, oh, we can do this. But it's so many steps. And it's like, I feel like even though I've worked at 54 Below for so many years, it changes constantly in terms of like the exact day to day, although it's never not, 300 emails a day, but it's really like, we're bringing on board a development director. We have a board. It's a huge added thing to all of us in how our departments interact with raising all of this money to then hopefully make these programs happen. With the first thing being that, we need to raise the money just to keep doing what we've already been doing and hopefully be able to really start these initiatives very soon and have the funds to do so. So it's really at a time when, a lot of nonprofits are struggling and there are, less financial resources for everybody. Being kind of a new nonprofit and transitioning into that, it's going really well. But there are so many steps that have to be taken for each thing that we want to do that, is going to require funds.
Mm. It's such a huge undertaking, but it's also very exciting that the possibilities that can open up as a not-for-profit and like you mentioned, the programs that you're going to be able to offer.
It's so exciting. And I think also it's like so many of the shows we present, it's like we can't keep presenting the like taking risks on the variety of material and new artists and all of these things without being a nonprofit and being able to subsidize those efforts for when, there's an incredible show and an incredible artist and they don't break even on their show. It's like, how do we serve the community and serve artists with programming that is worthwhile when, in terms of ticket sales, like, so many of my favorite theaters and spaces are nonprofits for that reason, for needing to subsidize when sales are unpredictable, to having nothing to do with the quality of performance. So yeah, I think ideologically it's certainly something that we all have been dreaming of for a long time. And then in terms of the actual like on the ground day to day, it's a lot of new things that we're really trying hard to make happen.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that Margaret Hall is producing the Howard Ashman Alan Menken special. What else can we look forward to coming up at 54 Below?
Yeah, so we have a like crazy exciting June. One of my favorite musicals of the last decade, Hands on a Hard Body, is doing a 10-year reunion concert. We have a ton of like Pride shows for Pride Month, including like Jen Colella and tons of like exciting group shows with emerging artists doing Pride shows. We have like a Joe Iconis and Family run in June. So it's just like a lot of my favorites are in June. We have Sean Cassidy is playing 54 Below for the first time as a solo artist, and Amber Grey the next week. So it's like, in terms of like June headliners, it's like, okay, everyone from Sean Cassidy to Amber Gray, who both of whom I've tried to get for years. And the rest of the summer is like, equally exciting. It's like you look at June, July, August, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like just nonstop exciting folks. And a lot of this summer, for whatever reason, has turned out to be artists I've tried to get for a really long time who are finally happening. We have Beth Bears and Tashina Arnold in July as well. We have like Brenda Braxton, who's launching a new series. She's been with us before, but just in terms of that series is new. A lot of good stuff this summer.
Oh my goodness, cannot wait. And friends who are listening, highly recommend either going in person or obviously Film Live Musicals streaming online. The quality of the captures is so high and it's worth every penny. And tickets are not expensive either, but the streams are just excellent. And like I've never watched a bad stream from 54 Below. It's always just
so nice to hear.
So much fun. Truly the captures are so great. You can feel the excitement in the room. The quality of the sound is really great, and the caliber of the performances are just outstanding. There's nowhere else like 54 Below.
Thank you. That means a lot.
Oh, it is my pleasure. So this brings us to my final segment called My Favorite Things, where I ask you my favorite questions. These are a few of my favorite things. To start us off, what is your favorite musical?
Merrily We Roll Along, my favorite musical.
So excited for the Broadway revival.
Me too.
What is your favorite filmed live musical?
Such a hard question. There's so many. For some reason, the first thing that came to my mind was Come From Away, because I just loved it. And I watched it recently and was like, this is an incredible live capture. So I'm going to say that, but I do have so many.
I know there's asked me this question, like, what time of day is it? What day is it? And what's my mood today? A filmed live musical isn't quite a stage show and it's not quite a movie. So what should we call it?
Ooh. Is it that like we can't use the acronym filmed live stage musical as like an awkward acronym? That's a great question. I don't have a fast answer for that. What's your answer for that?
I mean, I guess filmed live musicals, but no one knows what it is. It's frustrating that we don't know what to call it yet.
I've definitely said the word pro shot, and people who I know who love watching musicals are like, what? I'm like, oh, okay, that's not what we call it, I guess.
Yeah, I like pro shot, but I think like outside of like inside people, people don't understand what that means.
Yeah,
it's tricky. If you think of one, let me know.
I will.
Where do you stand on bootlegs?
Complicated. I love that this is in like kind of the lightning round. The bootleg of it all is that I feel like they're educational in so many ways. I feel like my love for theater was so nurtured by having access to bootlegs where it didn't cost anyone anything, because I certainly wasn't able to see the show. And if I hadn't gotten a bootleg for Hanukkah, which did happen in my childhood, I never would have known that musical. And on the other hand, it's like, I understand that, creatives need to be paid, artists deserve to be paid. There's a kind of problem that happens in terms of selling the property otherwise when there's bootleg proliferation. So like, I understand on all levels. It's also, as someone who like produced a musical that might not even have gotten to the level it got without bootlegs that nurtured the fan community and made them want to come see the show in person, it's really complex. It's really complex. I've been trying to think of a parallel, like another industry that deals with something similar, but it's very unique to the theater and certainly is like a complicated issue.
Was that Be More Chill?
Yes, yeah.
Which stage musicals do you wish had been filmed?
Ooh. Well, I mean, I am staring at this poster in my apartment right now. So I have for years thought that Smile deserves a really big comeback. And I feel like that's one of those shows where like, if we ever got even like an encores or a limited run of like Smile and it was filmed, it would go gangbusters, just like, Legally Blonde. I think that like the audience that would really respond to that, myself included, and love it, would be very keen on a live version being filmed.
Yes, please. I love that answer. I am joining your petition. What stage musicals would you like to see filmed in the future?
Well, I guess I answered that question by accident just now. Um, Good question. I feel like as we move into this era where more stage musicals are being filmed live, I would love to see, like just some of the more underappreciated musicals. And like, I saw there's this incredible theater company run by Rob Schneider, J2 Spotlight, that just this past season did Woman of the Year and Sugar and the Goodbye Girl. And I saw their amazing production of A Class Act last year. It's like the York Theater does a lot of this amazing work, and I've been such a fan of theirs for years. Obviously, Encores is like the gold standard in terms of rare and underappreciated musicals. Just finding a way to properly monetize and compensate people for like filmed live pro shots that are not necessarily Hamilton, and having some kind of a fair but like possible system to make some of these lesser known musicals available via streaming and live filmed versions.
Oh, yes, please. There's a company in Australia called Neglected Musicals, and
Mhm.
they, similar to Encores, will perform, as the title suggests, musicals that haven't been performed very often or not revived very often. And as like the theater nerd in me desperately wants every single thing that they produce to be streamed or recorded in some
Definitely.
way. Finally, where can we find you online?
I am at Jen Ash Tep, the first three letters of each of my three names, on all social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I haven't been using Twitter as much as of late, and I really miss it. I feel like it at times has been such a great way to connect with fellow theater nerds. So I feel like I was just thinking, like, I'm going to go back to Twitter. So at Jen Ash Tep on all the platforms. And I also, I've been writing a regular column for Broadway World recently where folks can write in any question they have about Broadway, and I will try to answer it. And as long as we're talking about it, it's like, write some questions into Broadway World, because I just today was like, oh my God, there's so many good reader questions I have to get on for my next column. And it's been a really fun way to research myself on things that I know 80% of that fans are like, how come this? And I'm like, I know that, but it's really been a fun activity as a theater historian and nerd.
Oh, that's super wonderful. Jen, thank you so much for your time. It's just been so delightful to chat with you and learn more about go behind the scenes of just the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for all of the really incredible questions and like such a deep conversation about all things live musicals and streaming.
Oh, my pleasure. The Filmed Live Musicals podcast is created and edited by your host, Luisa Lyons. FilmedLiveMusicals.com is where musicals come home. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. A shout out and all the thank yous to our wonderful patrons: Josh Brandon, Geraldine Brewer, Belinda Broido, Andy Capone, Elliot Charles, Alexander Dovton, Rachel Esteban, Mercedes Esteban Lyons, Hannah Graneman, James T. Lane, Allison Matthews, Al Monaco, David Negrin, Jesse Rubinowitz and Brenda Goodman, David and Catherine Rubinowitz, Joe Tilliston, and Beck Twist. Patrons generously provide financial support to preserve the history of filmed stage musicals and the creation of one easy place to find them all. If you would like to support the site, receive early access to this very podcast, and early access to site content, become a Filmed Live Musicals patron for as little as $3 a month. Visit filmedlivemusicals.com to learn more. If you like what you hear, please leave a review on Apple Music. It really helps to get the word out about the show. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks for listening.